Hey, before we dive into this week's episode, if you've been enjoying the show, I'd love your support. Take just 10 seconds to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps others discover the wisdom and inspiration that I share on the Pivot to Balance podcast. Let's build a community of balance seekers together. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to share the love. Now let's dive into the episode. Hello and welcome to the Pivot to Balance podcast. I'm your host, AK, and I hope you're doing well. In a world that pulls us in a million different directions and with a billion distractions, finding balance can feel like an ambiguous quest. Join me on this podcast as I try to navigate life's twists and turns with mindfulness, purpose, and grace. In each episode, we will dive into topics like self-care, personal growth, mindset shifts by sharing practical insights, stories, and maybe even interviews. Get ready to pivot, to recalibrate, and find your balance. Follow the Pivot to Balance podcast, and I will see you on the other side. Welcome back to this week's episode. Happy New Year. I have a quick thought before we jump into this week's episode. So lately, I've been reflecting on balance and honestly, this podcast too. And the thing here is balance isn't perfect. It's not this 80% work, 20% rest thing. It's not about perfectly balanced meals every day or some flawless routine. And honestly, I read somewhere that if you only have 10% to give on a certain day and you give that 10%, that's you giving 100%. For some reason, that hit me so hard. And I'm not quoting the thing correctly. I'm just saying it said something like that. I can't remember the exact quote. So this past year, I've had so many days where I felt like I had just 10% left in me. And honestly, I've been giving my full 10% every single time. Some days I crush it, checking off all the boxes, getting everything done. And there are some days where I do nothing. And that's okay too, because that is balance. But the way that I used to think about it, trying to balance everything every single day, it got so overwhelming. And I realized it's not realistic. And since this whole podcast started with the idea of balance in that way, thinking, oh, you have to balance every single thing every single day, that itself started burning me out. And I've been rethinking whether the name still resonates or if it's time to evolve. If the Pivot to Balance is still the name that we need to keep. Maybe it still does resonate. Maybe it still makes sense. Maybe we're all just, works in progress. But I would honestly love your input. So DM me on Instagram and let me know your thoughts on what balance actually really means to you. And I'm taking feedback until March 1st, 2025. So don't hold back. Please do reach out to me and tell me. If you want to be anonymous, I have an NGL link in the bio or in the description. So please leave your thoughts. I would really appreciate that, or any feedback that you have as well. So cool. Let's jump into today's episode. Today's thought is the power of reframing challenges. So let me start off by asking you a question. How often do you look at a problem in your life and think, this is so hard, why does this always happen to me? I've done that. I've done that so many times in the last couple of months. We've all done that. But the thing here is I've learned your mindset about a challenge is often the real challenge. When I first started writing my book, I would sit there staring at a blank page thinking, who am I to write this? What do I even have to say? To be honest, that doubt was so loud that I have convinced myself to quit it so many times. And there was this one day when I went to Harvard and I saw 18, 16-year-old kids talking about writing a book and how they've published books. And I was like, what if this isn't about writing a perfect book? What if this is just about telling the things that I think I know and the things that I want to say in a perfect way that's perfect to me, but maybe it's not perfect to everybody? What if it's just about telling my story? That simple shift in perspective changed everything. That's why I even started sharing the journey on Instagram. If you're not following me, you should, because I'm sharing my book writing journey there. And this whole thing is called reframing. So instead of looking at challenges as obstacles, which, let's be real, we often do when we're in the midst of it, we're this is so hard. Why does this always happen to me? But when you start looking at them as opportunities, of course, easier said than done. But when you start looking at them as opportunities, you're starting to reframe. So, for example, imagine you're at the gym and you've got one more rep to do. Your body's screaming like, stop, why? Let me be. But instead of thinking, I'm so tired, I cannot do this, what if you thought, this is the moment where I get stronger? This is where it counts. It's a small change, but it makes all the difference. So why does reframing work? I was thinking about this because when I convinced myself and I told myself you were writing this book, I was like, I wonder if there's a term for this. Because, I'm that nerd. So let me nerd out for a second. Hey, if you listen to this podcast, I think you will also love my newsletter, Elevator Gazette. I talk a lot about elevating your professional and your personal lives. Make sure to subscribe to my newsletter. Go to anushakanan.com/email list, and I'm sure you will love it. Join everyone who is like-minded. And now let's get into the episode. Your brain has this thing called neuroplasticity, right? It's basically the ability to rewire itself based on your thoughts and actions. So when you reframe how you see challenges, you're literally training your brain to approach problems differently. So think of it as every time you choose to see a challenge as an opportunity, you're strengthening that mental muscle. And it won't feel natural at first, but over time it becomes your default setting, right? For example, there was a time last year when everything felt like it was falling apart. Work, personal life, even my podcast. I was so frustrated. I thought, why does everything have to be so hard? And there's this dialogue in Brooklyn Nine-Nine where Jake Peralta says, why can't things just work out perfectly for me? And that used to be my wallpaper for so long. And then I sat down and asked myself, what is the lesson here? What's this challenge trying to teach me? All of this sounds very woo-woo, right? It's like, okay, great, sounds good, but in the moment, I just don't want that to be happening to me. But I think every time I get super overwhelmed, and I'm not saying this as a historical thing. This happened last week. This happened yesterday. I've sat down and just been like, why can't I control things? Why can't I fix it? And what I have realized is every single time I try to control something around me, the universe or God or whatever you want to call it, it's like, yeah, I'd like to see you try and lose. And I don't like to lose. So it's like, you have to let go. The lesson there is reframe and let go. To stop trying to control every outcome and trust that things will work out the way it's supposed to. That's a very hard pill to swallow, but it changed how I approach challenges. And it's a work in progress. Like I said, 3 days ago, I was freaking out. I was like, why can't I control this? I want X, Y, and Z to happen. Why is this not happening? And I had a podcast called 20s in Transition with a friend, and we talked about the law of attraction, I think, the episode. And I used to say in that, there are some things in life that no matter how hard you try, you just have to just sit with it. Because the more you try, the more resistance you feel. Because you're trying. It's like when you look at a clock, if you sit down and look at a clock and be like, it's 12 now and I want it to become 12:30, the time it takes to become 12:30 is so long. It feels like a decade. But when you're not noticing, if you're like, oh, it's 12, okay, I'm going to get some work done. And then you turn, it's 2. And then you say, how did that time run by so fast? It's because you were not focusing on it. So, how can you start reframing today? Like I said, it's always going to be a work in progress. You'll never get 100% right. If you do, amazing, love that for you. But these are 3 things that I'm thinking about. First, pause and acknowledge the challenge. So instead of reacting, take a moment to just sit with it. Great, these are the cards that I've been dealt with. Secondly, ask yourself, what's the opportunity here? Maybe it's a chance to grow. Maybe it's a chance to learn something new, or to prove to yourself that you're stronger than you think. All of it sucks. It sucks in the moment, But in the future, you'd be like, wow, I have a great story to say, or hey, this experience helped me think about X, Y, and Z in a different way. And the third thing is take one small step forward, even if it's the tiniest of action, like making a plan, asking for help, saying that this sucks, and just being like, it sucks, but I'm going to let it go. I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to go grab myself a cup of lemon water. I'm going to sit. I'm going to light a candle. And I'm going to just sit. I'm going to read. I'm going to do something else. I'm not going to think about the issue. I'm not saying neglect. I'm saying sit with it. Just sit with it. Think about what the opportunity could be. Think about it in a different light. And take one small step. I want to leave you with this. Challenges are inevitable, but how you see them, that's up to you. Again, reiterating that everything, all of us, we're all works in progress. And I think you should never be like, oh my God, this person has it together. That person has it together. They have something that I want. I don't. Everybody has their own challenges and not everybody talks about it. So I think it's very important, especially the last couple of years. I've seen a lot of people around me go through so many challenges that they don't talk to each other about, but I know a lot of them. And it makes me feel like if you had any idea what the other person's going through, you would never say things like that. So that is the thing, right? You never really know what anybody's going through. You never really know why something is happening to you. But I'd like to believe that a lot of them is just a chance to grow. So what's one challenge you're facing right now? Let me know if you want to share that. I'd love to hear how you're trying to reframe it. Yeah, that's all I've got for you for today's episode. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope this was helpful. Don't forget to follow this podcast. Don't forget to rate and review. I have a newsletter that goes out every Sunday and Thursday. If you're not signed up for that, anushakanan.com/email list. You'll find the link. You can also find the link in the description. Go grab a cup of lemon water, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.